Welcome to worship. Welcome to Palm Sunday. And thank you for welcoming me to your living room. I'm your pastor, Louise from the Congregational Church of Birmingham, United Church of Christ. Whoever you are, wherever you've been on your journey this week, you are welcome here, and everywhere is God's house now. During this Lenten season, we have taken 6 weeks to move through 1 week. The last week of Jesus' human life is Holy Week. Like the girl staring at the framed paintings, this has allowed us to expand time, to freeze frame important moments, and dig deeper into our own stories, which are our faith stories. This morning marks the beginning of Holy Week itself, the journey from Palm Sunday and the parade all the way to a grave. So let us begin by remembering that triumphant parade. Before our world shifted, we started the Lenten journey with a parade on March 1st, and we considered our role as supporters of Jesus' mission in the world. And then we found ourselves in the midst of the chaos and the throngs of people in Jerusalem who were there for the Passover. We stopped there. And we wondered, how could we join Jesus, who is passionately angry? We asked ourselves, are we clearing out our lives and hearts, our places of worship? Are we making them a welcoming place where the love of God is evident? We followed Jesus as he continued to teach in the city and among the people at the temple. His teachings filled our hearts as they filled those long ago, and we remembered the call to proclaim justice in the midst of injustice, wherever we find it. Then the paradigm shifted, and we were no longer in a building for worship. But Jesus' story and ours continued to be entwined in our online worship. We joined the woman who interrupted the disciples at a table of extravagance, a table of affection, a time of overflowing love. And then we went to another supper where all our assumptions about being first and best were turned upside down. Love is humble. Love takes up a towel and serves. This week we join Jesus in the garden. The Garden of Gethsemane is the moment when a chain of events begins, and like a virus unchecked, its trajectory runs headlong into tragedy. Once Jesus is taken into custody, there is no going back. So we pause a moment with him in the garden just before his arrest. And we feel with him the temptations that arise when facing difficult circumstances, to run, to hide, to use whatever power we have to change things, fight it, perhaps even bargain with God. We walk among the sleepy disciples who, like us, can't grasp what is about to happen. Let us pray together our opening prayer. Dear God, here we are with Jesus. We find ourselves alongside him in a garden of grief for the violence and tragedy of so many endure in this world. We are tired. We don't know what to do next. And so we sleep sometimes, hoping to awake from a bad dream. Forgive us, O God. Help us face this hour, knowing you are always here. You only ask the same of us, to be present, to be awake. You entered our story through Jesus, Now help us to enter fully into the story of your kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. Know this. We can open the story and let it remind us that no matter what we face or how we fail to meet the demand of the moment, second chances are possible. We are forgiven and freed, encouraged and loved by a God who wants us to live fully and abundantly. Let us enter the passion of Christ at peace and with confidence.
Enter the passion. Enter the place we belong, not just looking on. For this is our passion. Enter the passion.
Sing with me.
Enter the passion. Enter the place we belong, not just looking on. For this is our passion. Enter the passion. Enter the story. Enter the passion. Enter his passion.
So I'd like to invite the children to pay attention because we are going to present the gospel lesson, Mark chapter 14, 32 to 36, where Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. So today's story is about prayer, and it also involves a lot of action. So listen very carefully and act out the actions you hear in the story. So let's enter the story. Jesus and his disciples walked to a place called Gethsemane, a garden at the foot of the Mount of Olives. He told his disciples, "Sit here while I go pray." Peter and the two others walked with Jesus a little way. Then Jesus told them, "Stay here, keep watch." And Jesus went to a spot, lay down, are you laying down, face first, and said to God, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering away from me. However, not what I want, but what you want." Jesus stood up and walked over to the disciples. He found them sleeping. "Couldn't you stay awake with me for 1 hour?" he asked. 2 more times he walked over by himself. 2 more times he lay down face first to pray. 2 more times he stood up and walked back to find the disciples sleeping. One of Jesus' closest friends, Judas Iscariot, led soldiers to the garden. They marched in. Jesus could have tried to run. But Jesus stood and said, "Friend, do what you have come to do." Great job. You did a good part of the story. So Jesus could have done things the easy way. He could have tried to run when he had the chance. But Jesus knew he could talk to God any place, any time. Still, even Jesus had special places where he felt close to God, and the Garden of Gethsemane was one of those places. Where is a place that you feel especially God? A place where you can not only talk to God, but maybe you can hear what God might be trying to say to you. So it's time for our echo. We put our hands over our heart. We dare to join the journey. We will walk your loving way. We will live your sacred story through the things we do and say. Amen. So our monologue this week is one of the disciples in the painting who is feeling sleepy and is wondering about what was heard at the table. Let's listen in and see if we find our own perspective of struggling with all of the details we hear and see.
Too much wine, perhaps. Or maybe I'm so sleepy because I'm just so very tired. This week is taking its toll on me. We have been watching our every step, wondering when the other shoe will drop, afraid that the commotion stirred up about Jesus will result in something terrible. I've been on edge ever since we got here. But oh my, that parade! Who would have thought that this man I met on the shores of my fishing spot would turn out to be 3 years of nonstop surprises? The entrance into Jerusalem was more amazing than all of it combined. I felt sure that I was part of something that was going to change everything. Now I'm not so sure. Not everyone, it turned out, was so pleased about Jesus' arrival here. And we've been under scrutiny for days. Then tonight at the table, Jesus revealed that one of us was about to hand him over. I'm noticing who is missing here in the garden, and I'm wondering if maybe he was right. My gut turns over with the thought of it. I do not want to accept that these people who have become my family could turn against one another under pressure. Fear threatens the cord of our connection. So why put ourselves out here in the open? I need to stay awake, keep watch. I've got my sword. I know Jesus told me not to bring it, but come on. All he seems to think we need to do is pray. He asked us to pray with him. Yes, I pray. I'm praying, fervently praying. But is it enough? How can God help us if soldiers arrive? And yet, I'm so sleepy.
Enter the passion. Enter the place we belong. Not just looking on. For this is our passion. Enter the passion.
Sing with me.
Enter the passion. Enter the place we belong. Not just looking on. For this is our passion. Enter the passion. Enter the story. Enter the passion. Enter his passion.
We remember today all who grieve, who feel that they have no way out of their circumstances. We mourn all who have no choice but to live with violence that threatens their lives. We live in this moment together, knowing there is fear, there is death. We pray because, like Jesus, we trust God. we can be real in our fears and grounded in our faith in a God who is in the moment, in this life, with us. Let us pray. Oh, dear God, please be in our story as we seek to be in Jesus' story, because the way ahead looks bleak. Walk with us. Sit with us. Hold us when our loved ones cannot. Open our spirits to be present with our feelings of mortality. Open our hearts to be present with each other. Keep us in the moment so that no one is denied a listening ear as fears increase. You call us to stand with each other no matter the cost. So we give you thanks for the people who are stepping up to build the equipment, to manufacture the gowns, to sew the masks at home. We give thanks for humor and humanity that leaves space for grief and holds no judgment for anger. We are in the garden with Jesus, praying this will stop. We know you are with us in this. And so we walk together with Jesus from the garden of prayer to the grave and beyond. It's Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter. And oh, dearest God, we have put all our eggs in your basket, for you are with us in denial and doubt, when we are wrong and when we are right. You are with us when we are Judas and Peter and the mysterious naked disciple, or the women at the cross. You are with us on this journey. So we pray in the garden of our hearts, and we join our voices in our many homes to pray as Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. We are called by God to live now, to be the ones who watch and wait with each other. This is the time to pull together, to support each other, to give so that others have enough. So we are still supporting Lighthouse and SOS for our Easter dedications. You can send those honor and memory dedications to Beth in the office at ccbinfo@ccbucc.org. Our giving commitments and weekly offerings obviously can still be mailed to the church as we continue to support our staff and the ministry of our congregation. Please send your prayer requests to me on our Facebook page. You can message me on my Facebook page or send it to my personal email. We are in this together. And now we continue our journey with Jesus from the Garden of Gethsemane to the grave, hearing the texts, the stories, and pausing to consider our place in the story. The arrest. Suddenly, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, came with a mob carrying swords and clubs. They had been sent by the chief priests, legal experts, and elders. His betrayer had given them a sign: "Arrest the man I kiss and take him away under guard." As soon as he got there, Judas said to Jesus, "Rabbi," then kissed him. Then they came and grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the bystanders drew a sword and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his ear. Jesus responded, "Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like an outlaw? Day after day I was with you, teaching in the temple, but you didn't arrest me. Let the scriptures be fulfilled." And all his disciples left him and ran away. One young man, a disciple, was wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran away naked. The Inquisition. They led Jesus away to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and legal experts gathered. Peter followed him from a distance, right into the high priest's courtyard. He was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for testimony against Jesus in order to put him to death. But they couldn't find any. Many brought false testimony against him, but they contradicted each other. Some stood to offer false witness against him, saying, "We heard him saying, 'I will destroy this temple constructed by humans, and within 3 days I will build another, one not made by humans.'" But their testimonies didn't agree even on this point. Then the high priest stood up in the middle of the gathering and examined Jesus. "Aren't you going to respond to the testimony these people have brought against you?" But Jesus was silent and didn't answer. Again, the high priest asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the human one sitting on the right side of the Almighty and coming on the heavenly clouds." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we need any more witnesses? You've heard his insult against God. What do you think?" They all condemned him. "He deserves to die." Some began to spit on him. Some covered his face and hit him, saying, "Prophesy!" Then the guards took him and beat him. So here we are, in reality, seeking not to run from reality. You know, for years as a pastor, I always lamented that we didn't get to spend more time in Holy Week, that we sort of skipped from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday without experiencing all of the story of Jesus and the passion in between. And so this year we've had a chance with, the Sundays, every Sunday going through a day in the Passion story. But now I feel like we're going to be in Holy Week for a long time. I heard someone this week tell me, "Well, I wasn't sure what I was going to give up for Lent, but I guess we've been told what to give up for Lent." Barbara Holmes is an African-American teacher and writer, and she's been a lawyer and an instructor and a spiritual guide. She says, "But crisis doesn't just happen to individuals. It also happens to communities, particularly when a community shatters on the anvil of injustice." Thank you, Barbara Holmes. We know that we are in this together. But there are times when we want to run away like that naked man in the garden, the mysterious man, no one knows who he was. And maybe that's a good thing, because then we can put ourselves in his circumstance. It's difficult to not see the end of this Holy Week, to see the lying witnesses and leaders desperate for a scapegoat. We see all of these things lived out each day in our world. We see the mocking soldiers. We see those who didn't believe that this really was a pandemic. And so it is a pandemic. And we cannot run from reality. Jesus' passion has become our passion. So we live in the moment with Jesus, a Jesus who shows vulnerability and who shows resolve. Holy Week is here. It's here to stay for many weeks. But we do not walk alone. The denial. Meanwhile, Peter was below in the courtyard. A woman, one of the high priest's servants, approached and saw Peter warming himself by the fire. She stared at him and said, "You were also with the Nazarene, Jesus." But he denied it, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand what you're saying." And he went outside into the outer courtyard. A rooster crowed. The female servant saw him and began a second time to say to those standing around, "This man is one of them." But he denied it again. A short time later, those standing around again said to Peter, "You must be one of them because you are also a Galilean." But he cursed and swore, "I don't know this man you're talking about." At that very moment, a rooster crowed a second time. Peter remembered what Jesus told him, "Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down, sobbing. So, doing the best we can. We always want to do the best we can, right? And we're so much easier on ourselves than we are sometimes on others who are also doing the best they can. A few weeks ago, I got really upset. Some of you know I have a thing about blinkers. I think we should use them. Let people know where we're going, what we're doing. It's helpful. I was cruising through Berkeley on 12 Mile, keeping to the 30 miles an hour, and there was a police car. I believe it was a state police car driving also same direction. And then out of the blue, just turns across and into the gas station and gets out. He's taking his time, so I'm thinking he's in no hurry. So if he's in no hurry, why didn't he turn his blinker on? Brian McLaren says, "The compassionate one is our gracious friend, and we don't have to earn anything, deserve anything, achieve anything, or merit anything to bring our needs to God." I love this story of Peter. I love that he's passionate about his love for Jesus, and he's also passionate about saving his own skin. In that moment, he was doing the best he could, honestly. And he was sorry. He cried. And then, of course, we know he went on to be one of the great evangelists of the early church. In these difficult times, each of us is seeking to do the best we can, and we need to be gracious with each other as we are making efforts to keep each other safe in every way we can think, every way possible. I was reminded this week of the Black Death of the 14th century, where 1/3 of the population of Europe died. Millions and millions of people died. And in those days, they were doing the best they knew how. I am so grateful in these days that there are scientists and researchers working furiously, doing the best they can to help us. If Peter can deny Jesus and become a hero, there's hope for us. May we be gracious with each other. May we be forgiving. And may we in each moment seek to do the best we can, even when the cock crows. Torture and death. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means skull place. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. They crucified him. They divided up his clothes, drawing lots for them to determine who would take what. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The notice of the formal charge against him was written, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 outlaws with him, one on his right and one on his left. People walking by insulted him, shaking their heads and saying, "Ha! So you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, were you? Save yourself and come down from that cross." In the same way, the chief priests were making fun of him among themselves, together with the legal experts. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross. Then we'll see and believe." Even those who had been crucified with Jesus insulted him. From noon until 3 p.m, the whole earth was dark. At 3, Jesus cried out with a loud shout, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you left me?" After hearing him, some standing there said, "Look, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, and put it on a pole. He offered it to Jesus to drink, saying, "Let's see if Elijah will come to take him down." But Jesus let out a loud cry and died. The curtain of the sanctuary was torn in 2 from top to bottom. When the centurion who stood facing Jesus saw how he died, he said, "This man was certainly God's Son." Some women were watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, the younger one, and Joses and Salome. When Jesus was in Galilee, these women had followed and supported him, along with many other women who had come to Jerusalem with him. So we continue to enter the story and ask ourselves, who is there for you, for me? Eddie Hillesum said, "I am not alone in my tiredness or sickness or fears, but at one with millions of others from many centuries, and it is all part of life." You'd think that Eddie wrote this last week, or the week before, or yesterday. But Eddie died in Auschwitz in 1943. She understands how we are here for each other. Jesus died screaming, think it's good to remember that. Jesus died screaming. And who heard him? The women. These powerless people who owned what power they could and stood their ground, being there with Jesus in the most agonizing moment of his life. And we know that there are COVID patients dying with only medical staff to comfort them. Maybe they're holding a cell phone to their ear so they can hear the voice of a loved one, a friend, or their pastor, or another person who knows them. Eddie knew we are not alone. And we know that we have to be that message for each other. We have to be willing to recognize the suffering of others and to honor each other's pain. That means leaving room in our conversations to say, what are you afraid of? How are you really doing? And not just go directly to our humor. And we are so good at humor. But we need space for both, for the grief and for the joy. We enter the story of Jesus and all humanity as God's hands and representing God's heart. So I bless you and I bless us all on our journeys, our journey through this time. This is a holy week, so please remember that love has you. Love is you. Love alone and your deep need for love recognizes love everywhere. The peace of Christ is with you and with me, and always will be. Amen. The burial. Since it was late in the afternoon on Preparation Day, just before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea dared to approach Pilate and ask for Jesus' body. Joseph was a prominent council member who also eagerly anticipated the coming of God's kingdom. Pilate wondered if Jesus was already dead. He called the centurion and asked him whether Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that Jesus was dead, Pilate gave the dead body to Joseph. He bought a linen cloth, took Jesus down from the cross, wrapped him in the cloth, and laid him in a tomb that had been carved out of a rock. He rolled a stone against the entrance to the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was